Are you looking for a new action-packed read, something that will transport you to a fantasy world? Well, New York Times bestselling author Victoria Aveyard joins us now with details on the second installment of her action-packed fantasy series. The new book is called Blade Breaker, and it's available now. So we're excited to have you here, Victoria. But first, before we get into Blade Breaker, give us a brief overview of your first installment, Realm Breaker.
Yeah, so I like to say that the Realm Breaker series is Lord of the Rings meets Guardians of the Galaxy. It's what happens when the classic fantasy heroes set out to save the world and all die. They fail. So I always had this question of like, who's the B team of saving the world? And that's what these books are about, like the not heroes having to come together to save the world because they don't want to die.
I love that, and maybe the everyday person reading that can relate a little bit, right? So tell us then about Blade Breaker.
Yeah. Blade Breaker is the direct continuation of Realm Breaker. The story escalates in a really big way. And one thing I really love about Blade Breaker and this series in general is we're following the villains almost as much as we're following the heroes. And I get a lot of feedback about people saying, well, I don't really know who to root for because I get it. I love when you have a villain who you know they're bad, but you understand why they're doing what they do. That's really interesting to me.
That is interesting. And you also wrote the Red Queen series, which sold over 3 million copies. Why do you think you do so well writing fantasy fiction? I mean, what about the genre are people loving?
One thing that I hear a lot from my readers is I didn't think I was a fantasy fan until I read your books and realized I do like fantasy, and that is the biggest compliment to me. I like to think that I write accessible fantasy. It's not terribly intimidating. I kind of trick the reader into liking fantasy. I pull you in slowly, and then suddenly you realize I'm reading a really big fantasy novel and I'm enjoying myself. I think sometimes people might have this preconceived notion of themselves and their taste, and you just got to try it out.
Definitely. And would you say this is geared toward a certain age?
Yeah, so the really beautiful thing about young adult novels is they're for everybody. Obviously, we are specifically writing for teenagers and young adults, but our audience breaks down into 50-50, 50% teens, 50% adults. And the genre really is encompassing for everybody because YA is specifically about people figuring out who they are and deciding who they want to be. And that's a journey that we can all relate to.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. That's a great way to put that. What ultimately, though, made you want to become a writer, Victoria?
Oh man, I was a writer before I could physically write. I was telling stories with my dolls and my action figures, and then I was writing with crayon. So it was really not so much a dream so much as a compulsion, and I didn't really realize there was a career to be made out of it until I was older, and I ended up going to college to study screenwriting at a film school. And that really spiraled out for me. And suddenly I'm here giving interviews about books.
So cool. Well, congratulations. Obviously doing well. It's in your blood, I guess you could say then. So thank you so much for joining us again today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. And remember, you can find Blade Breaker now wherever books are sold. And if you'd like to see this segment again, just head to our website, firstcoastliving.net.